Good morning. Welcome to my thought for the day. It's a Sunday again, and my thoughts turned to Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23 and 24. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. It is very important for us to meet. It is a fact of history, really, that because the church built buildings, the group of people that followed Jesus built buildings, it has become assumed, really, mostly by people who aren't believers, that the church is the building. I'm going to go to church today. Well, you're not thinking I'm going to that group of people who believe in Jesus. No, you're thinking I'm going to that building at the end of the road. But that's not what Jesus meant by his church, his ecclesia, his assembly, his gathering together of people. And for many people, being a Christian is an individual thing. I have my faith, you have your faith, I follow my faith. There are people I know who go to church, they slip in the back of a church meeting and they slip out before the end because they don't want to speak to anybody, they don't want to meet anybody. They are following their faith, they don't want anyone to talk to them about it, they just observe it and then they come home. I'm not saying they're not following Jesus, I'm just saying that they're not following the New Testament picture of what the ecclesia was meant to be. All the pictures, the illustrations, the parables that Jesus told or that the New Testament tells about the church are about gatherings. The church is like a body, the human body, with lots of parts. You can't, unless you're in a cartoon, you can't have a hand living on its own without the rest of the body. It has to be attached. You can't be a brick. What use is a brick on its own? The brick has to be part of a building. We are linked. We're linked to each other. And these verses in Hebrews 10, 20, 23 and 24, they encourage us to stand fast in our faith, but to consider how to stir one another up to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Now, this COVID thing has meant that many people have stopped meeting in a church, meeting with a real group of people. Meeting online was wonderful, and is wonderful, very helpful, and it has been sent by God, I think, a real godsend for the COVID period, because we were able to keep in touch with each other. And I did feel sad about those people who don't like modern technology and who simply didn't use what seems to have been a wonderful gift from God to keep people communicating with each other and seeing each other's faces. But be that as may, there are some people who still have not come back and gathered with others. And I'm sad about that, because the whole idea of the ecclesia is that it is a group of people that gather to worship, that come together to worship, that are drawn to each other. And of course that's wonderful, but I'm sure you know that you have people in perhaps the fellowship that you go to. If you chat with them, all they ever talk about is themselves. That's not really very helpful. I don't know if you today find yourself, when you're talking to people over coffee after church, you're talking to people about your woes, your difficulties, about your life, about what God is saying to you. That's great to share, but only to encourage the other person, not to centre the conversation on you. We need to encourage each other. We need to think of ways to stir each other up to love and good works, to keep going. You know, we're in this for the long haul. It's a day-by-day following of Jesus, and we need to be encouraging each other and helping each other to find ways to reach other people. And if people suggest ways, to encourage them in doing what they're doing. You know, there are some of us who are ideas people, and some of us who are doers, and some of us who, I'm afraid, at times, are sit-back and watchers. You know, the whole thing about the church, the ecclesia, the gathering, is that it's not a spectator sport. There's been a lot of spectator sport, watching men kicking a football up and down, or sometimes back and tip-tapping, as Terry calls it. Watching football, a spectator sport is great. You can get enthusiastic about that. But this is not what our faith is. Our faith is not a spectator sport. It's everyone involved, everyone reaching out and speaking for Jesus wherever they are. There are no bystanders, no watchers. We are all doing the bit that God has given us to do. And gathering together and encouraging each other. When we worship, we lift our eyes to heaven. We stop looking at our little lives and we look up and we see what God is doing, and we worship him, and we encourage each other to worship him. And we encourage each other with experiences we've had that testify to the goodness and faithfulness of God, and to the way that he has blessed us and the way that his Holy Spirit has led us. There's a great deal of encouragement we can give each other, and we should do that. Encouraging each other, praying for each other, but not neglecting meeting together, as is the habit of some. Don't neglect it. It's part of your calling to be part of this gathering that gathers to worship God. It's part of it. God bless you. Have a great day as you gather to worship with other believers. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.